Hi, I'm Dr. Dan Ratner. Today I have my own friend on, Scott Ross, who I helped get rid of his back pain from reading Sarno. We're going to revisit his story and hear about his thoughts on the whole process. If you haven't already, click subscribe, hit like, ring the bell for notifications, and put your comments below. I will respond to them personally. Okay, Scott, so I want to welcome you to the show. I'm going to introduce you to the viewers. You're a friend of mine. So the first friend of mine to come on and talk about the experience. You're the first one. And you do kind of loom large for me because when we talked about your pain, it was kind of a little bit early on in my work, and I was a little hesitant to venture out with a friend and say, oh, you know what? I know about this. But you and I both remember when this happened. Tell me what you remember about that time and what it was like talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, wow, I feel so honored, Dan, that I'm the first friend. That's because I think you have a lot of friends, so that's
I,
saying something.
yeah, you're a very good guy. I knew I had to have you on.
All right. So, what happened for me was, I guess, over the years, I've always had some sort of mysterious, I guess we'll call them medical things, like sore throats for a while. I was going through a period like that. And then I remember maybe about 15 years ago, I was playing softball and had this weird like arm numbness that started when I was throwing the ball. Anyway, but these things always kind of went away. And then in 20, I guess 13-ish, 2013, 2014, I started getting this really significant pain in sort of my neck and my shoulders and like tingling down and it really was like a shooting pain down mostly in my left arm, a little bit on the right too, but it was like significant. I don't know that I'd say it was ever debilitating. I never, stayed home from work because of it or anything like that, but it was getting worse, right? Um, and I tried, steroid medication, and that didn't seem to do anything. And tried three different physical therapists, and that didn't work. And then finally, I actually, what was funny was I remember it was in early May of 2014 because I turned 40 on May 3rd, and it had to be like maybe May 4th or 5th. It was like days after I turned 40. I was in an MRI machine. And then, you know how you have to like sit still, and with the pain too, like the sitting still hurts in and of itself, right? But I
Yeah.
remember sitting there thinking, and all I could think of myself was, this is 40. Like Paul Rudd was right. This is 40, I guess, right? Like
Right.
welcome to being
It
I'm in
would
a
have been
protected class now, and this is how I'm celebrating it, right?
it would have been a much less interesting movie if This Is 40 was just you in an MRI machine.
That's a
But
fair point. That's a fair point. I think you're right.
but you are capturing something that's really important about these kinds of things, the absolute horror of it all when you were fine at one point and now suddenly you're not for whatever reason, and you're trying to figure out what's going on, and you've tried other things. And so, okay, take me back to the moment then of the MRI machine. What were you thinking?
Um,
Were you worried that it was something particular? Go ahead.
I just figured I was like something's messed up in there. Yeah, I mean this isn't normal pain, right? I'm walking around all these sore. So I mean, while I was in the actual machine, besides that, I kept thinking of that movie and the irony of having turned 40 and now I'm in this machine. The other thing I just kept thinking was this really hurts, so like hurry it up out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, I guess it must have been over the course. I kind of slowly over that summer. I think I tried more physical therapy, and then I eventually saw a orthopedic surgeon who was recommended, and he took a look at it and showed me the MRI, and oh, this is the worst I've ever seen. I can't, he might not have said worst I've ever seen, but he definitely suggested that I needed to get surgery, relatively soon. I was walking around with a ticking time bomb in my spine, right? Um, so of course, I was like, well, I'm not, this is major surgery, so I'm not going to rush out and do this. So I sort of procrastinated a little bit. I tried calling around to get a second opinion, and that was taking some time. And I don't remember if I had a second opinion scheduled yet. But here's the part that you were alluding to before. So this was December of 2014. We were out in Colorado for one of my good friends, Jeremy's 40th birthday. Your first cousin. That's
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy's the reason we're friends. Um, and it was, big group of guys and women. It was a nice group. Yeah. So we were celebrating Jeremy's birthday. everyone was skiing, but I'm not really a skier. I skied once. I skied in 6th grade on the class trip, and hadn't skied since. So in some ways, I think maybe the herniated disc was a little bit of a good excuse for me to not get out on the slopes and just say, I'm just here for the beer and the 80s trivia and the good times with Jeremy, and you guys go ski. But I remember, you were asking me a lot of questions about the pain, and you had told me you had experienced a lot of pain and some issues in your back. And I told you that I was really seriously contemplating having this surgery. And this is the life-changing part of the weekend, right? You said, do me a favor, hold off, don't rush out to get the surgery. I want you to read some books. And so you told me all about Dr. Sarno and about his books, and you recommended, I think there were like 4 or 5 books at the time you recommended. And if I recall, I'm pretty sure I started with his first one, the one about back pain, and then one of the more was that does that make sense? Yeah, I should have looked this up before the interview, but
that's totally fine. I mean, I think what I recommended was Mind Over Back Pain is his first book, and it's like it's the quickest read. When I feel that somebody might be a little ambivalent about it,
right,
I usually recommend that one. So it might have been that. But one thing you may not remember is actually I also basically don't ski, but not because of my back. I just don't really like it that much. I'm afraid of heights. In varying degrees. I used to ski when I was younger. Then when I got a growth spurt, I didn't want to anymore. So I think also on that trip, you and I would hang out during the day some. I went snowshoeing instead.
That's right. Wow.
And so this might have given us. Well, hey, you had a lot on your mind then.
That's right. I must have blocked. In my mind, I was the only one who didn't ski out of like 14 people. But you're right. Yeah. Now that you're saying this is all this is probably when we were having the conversation, because it definitely wasn't during the Steelers or the Browns games, right?
No, probably not. Although the Browns used to give me back pain.
Yeah. I hear you. You guys got us back this year. But so, yeah, anyway, it's right. So we're talking, and you recommended the Sarno book, and you were telling me about your own experience. And to be honest, like, I don't know if I would have been, if some clown on the street had recommended these books, I'm not sure how open-minded I would have been. It all sounds a little suspect to someone who's not familiar with it. Yeah. But I knew your background in psychology, and probably even more importantly, you told me about your own personal experience with the pain. And so between that, I said, you know what? I'm going to listen to Dan, and I'm going to check these books out. So I read the Mind Over Back Pain, and then I think it was the Mind Body Connection. Maybe there's also a Mind Body Prescription, right? I've read them both. I don't remember the 2 that I read initially. But I have to say, I started reading the book just, I remember reading it at the gym on the elliptical machine. I'm reading it before bed. And before I even got to the end of the first book, I was already feeling some reduction in the severity of the symptoms. Some of the tingling and numbness was going away. The pain was still there, but it was becoming duller and less, just less of a nuisance in my day-to-day life. So whatever doubts I might have had when I first picked up the book quickly went away as I found it working as I was reading the book. I was like, I think Dan Ratner's onto something here.
Right. Well, I mean, and I say this a lot of times to people, it's the proof is in the pudding. It's very convincing when it starts to work for you. And a lot of times when I work with people, it's not working all at once, but the fact that it's working at all is it's a sign that something's going on here. All we're doing is changing your mind about something. So I appreciate you kind of sharing that there was some skepticism, because it's very normalizing for people who are listening out there that we're all skeptical. I was very skeptical of Sarno when I first heard it. The weird thing is now, when I look back and I think about things, I now hear other people talk about things, and I'm just like, wow, now I'm totally skeptical about what they're saying, because it's totally mixed up.
Right.
But I hear you. It's important that I was somebody you knew, that you felt like and I remember even thinking when I would talk to people about this, everybody's going to think I'm crazy, but I'm telling you, this really works. And the thing is, it's because it's based on science and logic, it's easier for me to settle into. And now I've done this so much, it's much easier to talk to people about it.
Sure.
But so okay, let's jump back to the pain starting to dull. You're starting to feel like, okay, maybe he's onto something. Was there anything in the reading that particularly grabbed you and made sense to you in a way that led to that symptom relief, or did it just start to go down as you read?
I'm trying to remember back now. I know that the big thing that I mean, because to this day, I still get flare-ups of the pain every once in a while, and I usually just break out either passages I've highlighted in the Sarno books, or more recently some written things you've sent me.
Mm-hmm.
I'll watch this program that I'll get my head back in the game, so to speak.
Yeah.
But at the time, I remember thinking that whole like think psychological piece of it was very important. That you had to me, I had to keep reminding myself there's nothing physically causing what I'm feeling here. And I've heard you say this many times. It doesn't make sense when you break it down. We meaning we as a society sort of accept, oh, it must be the wear and tear, right? All these sort of phrases we've come up with. Oh, it must be from that accident that happened 20 years ago. It didn't hurt you for 19 years and now it hurts. When you think about it, it sounds absurd, but we kind of have accepted that these are the causes of pain or other certain illnesses. So it's really that whole like getting my mind to wrapped around the idea that my brain is what's sending the pain signals to my arm. It's not the other way around. So I think that was most influential. I read it. My wife would sort of tease me. She's like, "What are you raging about today?" Right? Because a lot of the Sarno books are about subconscious or unconscious rage, right?
Yep.
And that part I had a little hard time because in the whole scheme of things, I have a fairly privileged life, and so I was like, I don't have that much to rage about. And since then, I've thought about it more, and maybe there's more to it. As you know, Dan, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 9 years old. And I've always managed it pretty well, and it's never really gotten in the way in my life. But now that I understand it a little bit better, it's certainly possible that sort of years of sort of subconsciously raging about having to manage this chronic condition may have contributed to it. But at the time I'm like, what am I raging about? But the other part that drew me in was the whole sort of personality type, that sort of perfectionist who wants everyone to like him and wants everyone to, sort of make sure everybody, that I think goodist was the word that Dr.
Yep.
Sarno used.
Yep.
And I don't know how to say that without sounding a little, but I thought that described me too. I think I'm very good. So.
Yeah, well, actually, it was one of the things that made me extra convinced when I was talking to you, and you were like, I was like, Scott Ross is having back pain. You're like the nicest guy that I've ever. Seriously, you are like top 5 nicest people I've ever met. I'm not even joking around about that. And you handle things really beautifully in terms of your diabetes. My wife is a diabetic too, so we've connected on that.
Sure.
And I do think there's a lot of rage in the diabetes, but sometimes it's not even rage. It's just anger that we're not aware of, or even just sadness. It could be other feelings. It doesn't have to be anger. But I knew you were this calm, collected, very nice guy, goodist like me, and we're having this conversation where, and ironically, I was thinking at the time, I was like, if I can just do this for Scott, I'll feel so good about myself.
I feel so good to hear, now that I see all the good you're doing with your program, and I'm really honored that you're getting big, I guess. Right?
Well, you fit into the story nicely, and one of them was the personality characteristic was so important when I read Sarno too. That was the thing. I was like, I've never been described so well by anyone for any reason, and I didn't think that I was going to find that in that book. So I appreciate you highlighting that. And I did want to ask one other question, because knowing your wife, I was curious. I was kind of curious how the family experienced the change, and you're getting better, and what was that like?
Sure. Yeah, well, after I read the book and the pain went away, I went to my wife, like, "You were gonna let that guy cut me open? What do you have, an insurance policy I'm not aware of? What's happening here?" I'm actually kidding. My wife was skeptical of the surgery from the beach. She's probably the main reason why it took me that long to schedule that second opinion. No, she was very accepting. And yeah, I mean, she says to this day, just even today, when she's like, "Oh, I'm so glad you're doing this for Dan because he really, kind of saved your life in some ways." She was very supportive, and obviously that helped. Now I have lots of other people in my life who I've tried to impart what I've learned for things that they're suffering from, and I have a little bit tougher time convincing them, but I'm going to hook them up with you.
Well, that sounds good, and I can show you some tricks of the trade in terms of, because I understand skepticism. I'll finish up on this, but the podcast is called Crushing Doubt, not just because we are supposed to crush doubt and get rid of it, but because we all have so much doubt, and it can be crushing when you're trying to figure out what's happening. And so the place to start, I think, is it's totally natural to be skeptical of these things. But I also loved that you highlighted that there's so many things we accept now that make no sense. I got in a car accident, didn't hurt for 19 years, now suddenly I do. That's so random.
Yeah, when you explain it that way, I've heard you say this on the program. Just yeah, it's so that really is not logical. People think it's logical, but
yeah, I mean, it
really
has
break it down.
Right, it has a potential logic to it, but when you look at it, it's certainly no more logical than this. And then when I start to talk to people about the fact that we have mind-body experience, like with blushing or even crying, is an emotional experience that becomes a real physical event.
Sure.
And that's another part. People worry about it's in your head kind of thing. It's not. It's from your head. It becomes real in the body. And I'm just glad that I was able to help you with this. And I was paying it forward too. Somebody told me about Sarno. It was my chiropractor at the time. And if he hadn't done that, I don't know where I would be.
Right.
And these kinds of discoveries radically change people's lives. And I'm honored that I got to play any kind of role in that for you. And especially for somebody as good as you. It feels good to have done that. So I don't know who's happier here.
I do appreciate that, Dan, and yeah, really, so glad it was Jeremy's 40th birthday that weekend because
that's right,
40th birthday since then.
40th birthdays loomed large, and you said, ironically, here I am in the MRI machine, but there was no irony to it. I'm sure there's something to that. It's a big event. So I wanted to thank you for coming on, Scott, and sharing your story. And I've kind of had it in my mind a long time coming that if I'm ever in this kind of position, I want to make sure to get Scott's story because it means so much to me personally in my own development of this. And so thank you for sharing and coming on.
That's the least I could do.
All right. Great seeing you, Scott.
All right. You too, Dan. Thank you.
Well, that was a blast having Scott on, not just because he's my friend, but the other part of it is that sometimes you help somebody, but you don't get to hear the whole story. And Scott and I have caught up over the years, but we both had young kids, so a lot of times we didn't have enough time to catch up and find out what really happened in all of that. So it was really amazing to hear his story about being in the MRI machine and turning 40. I didn't actually know those details except for, kind of tangentially. But he touched on some things that I thought were really important for the viewers and important to hear these stories again and again. Stories like skepticism. We all have doubts. One of the reasons I work with doubt is because we are all naturally going to have doubts. And when I talked to Scott about it, I was very clear, hey, I understand why you'd be skeptical of it, but just try to hear me out. And thankfully, I was a messenger who had some credibility, being a therapist, having had back pain before, and just hopefully being a decent person in general. And that helped him to consider it. But getting to hear about how he had to process the feelings that he had and not being able to get in touch with the anger, that's another theme that can come up. And I'm always struck by the individual experience people have of this and the parts that are hard to relate to. And then the third thing that I wanted to make reference to was how important it was for him to see the personality connect in the reading. That was the thing that sealed the deal for me. But if it's not the thing that seals the deal for you, that's okay. In fact, there's plenty of people who suffer from these conditions who do not have that profile, that personality profile. That's just one indication, but it is a very potent indication of things that is extremely convincing, because how would this book be able to describe me as well as it did? Getting to hear the impact I had on him really does mean a lot, especially, as I said, because he's such a good person to be able to have done that for him. And I didn't even do that much. I just got information and passed it on to him. But I'm so pleased that it worked out for him. He was one who got better fast. Don't read into that if you're not one who is getting better fast. There's all kinds of different paths for different people, and certain things work for certain reasons. Maybe it worked better for him because he was a friend of mine, and that could make him trusted even more. We don't know, but don't put pressure on yourself however it's coming out. I just wanted you to hear another story, more and more stories of people who are getting better, got better, working to get better, so that we can keep up this conversation. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, put your comments below, and I will get back to you personally. Thank you for watching.